Oh, hey guys, wanted to go over monthly three and have something for you guys to look back at. You're going to get your reports emailed to you with what you answered on the questions. So just quickly want to go over how to find the correct answers. So number one, Courtney read 1/8 of a book on Monday. On Tuesday, she read half of the same book. How much more did Courtney read on Tuesday than on Monday? Simple subtraction, right? She read half, one half of the book on Tuesday. She read 1/8 of it on Monday. We want to know how much more she read on Tuesday. So you have to subtract what she read on Monday, right? So you got to find your common denominator, which is 8. Multiply that by the 1. 2 goes into the 8 4 times 1. Subtract the 1/8. And she read 3/8 more. That's your answer. That's how easy that one is. Now, the tricky part, we talk with you kids all the time, is pay attention to what the question's asking you, right? Because a lot of you want to take the 1/8 and subtract 1/2. That's not what it said, right? It wants how much, here's the key words, how much more did she read on Tuesday? So that tells you got to take Tuesday and subtract Monday from it. If they gave you different words, it would mean different things, right? Okay, number 2, evaluate the expression. We've got to change this into a fraction and then just do the subtraction, right? So 5 times 3 is 15, plus the 3 is 18. Keep your denominator the same, minus 3/4. We need to now find a common denominator. That would be 20. So 5 into that 4, the 5 into that 20 is a 4. 18 times 4 is 72, minus 20. 4 into there is 5 times that is 15. So you would then have to, now you can just subtract straight across, and that gives you 57 20s. Now, this is where you guys can mess up on your FSA test. You have to write in 57/20, and then make sure you bubble in this slash. Because remember, all of this stuff is leading you to be ready for your monthly test, right? Or your FSA test. So number 3 says you can use the model to find the product. Remember, product means multiply. Now, they give you them all, so you shouldn't get confused with that because they give you the sign. I find this picture like a little confusing, but if you can use it, fine. But in the multiplication, you guys know you just go straight across, right? 1 times 4 is 4. You don't have to find any common denominators, nothing. 2 times 5 is 10. And there's your answer right there, right? There's really no trick. The trick, sometimes when they start to throw in these models, they get a little confusing. If you're good with the models, good. If not, just when it's multiplication, just multiply it right across, right? Okay, number 4 says Ashley has 3 cups of sugar. She uses a third of the sugar she has to make holiday cookies for her family. How many cups of sugar did Ashley use to make the holiday cookies? Here's another one where you've got to read the words because you got to make sure you're doing the right thing, right? She has 3/4 of a cup of sugar, right? She uses 1/3 of the sugar she has. So of this 3/4, a lot of you think she uses 1/3, and then you want to, you guys want to get all crazy and start subtracting, right? But you have to have a whole to subtract, right? So if you want to find what part of this she used, remember, when you take those fractions, you start to make things, you can get parts of it. That's when you have to multiply, right? So a lot of you would have thought to subtract this because it says she uses a third of it. You think you're taking it away. But we need to find out what a third of 3/4 is. And to do that, you have to multiply. So you would just multiply that by 1/3 equals 3/12. A would be your answer. But see, if you went through and subtracted, you would get this answer down here, right? So they put that on there to try to trick you. All right, let's keep going. Number 5, tons of us missed. This is, it's very, very, very confusing. They try to mess you up on this one, but select one answer from each box to make it true. Only one combination could be true. So you could test every single one. Remember, we showed you guys this 1,000 times. Think about what it's asking you. Picture it. There was a Thanksgiving feast. The answer is either 3, 4, or 5 families shared either 7 or 8 pies. each family will get a certain part of the pie, right? The only really way to do this is to put them all in there and find the one that makes sense, or think about it. Let's pretend it was maybe going to be 7, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pies. If 3, 4, or 5 families are sharing those, each family is going to get at least one pie, right? Because there's less families than pies. So now if you look over here at your choices, would each family only get 4/8 of a pie? That's only half a pie each. So F doesn't make sense, right? Now 7/5, you guys know you would have to reduce that into 1 1/5. So each family would get 1 1/5 pie. That could make sense, right? 5/7 of a pie is not even one whole pie. So that doesn't make sense. 3/8 of a pie is not even one whole pie. So that one doesn't make sense, right? So this one's very confusing, but I do it the most simple way I can think of, because whether this is 7 or 8 over here, and whether this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, each family is always going to get more than one pie, right? So there's only one answer that it could be. Now, the next important thing is, once you know G is your answer and 7/5, you need to make sure you bubble in 5 and 7, because we had some people get this right and they just picked G as the answer. But it says select one answer from each box. So you guys just have to think, if you pick the boxes and you decided to do 3 and a 7, that'd be 3/7. Well, does it make sense that each person would only get 3/7 of a pie? That doesn't actually make sense, right? So I know this is tough. I know it's a challenge, but you got to draw the picture out whenever you have a chance. Number 6, we did spectacular on. You guys know to just multiply out number 6. And we're working on test taking strategies. So, I mean, start to think about your answers, right? I just quickly like to eliminate ones that don't make sense. So 386 Legos is kind of close to 300, right? And 35 floors is kind of close to 30 floors, right? So if I multiply just the 3 and the 3 here, I know that it's got to be, add in my zeros, I know the answer's got to be somewhere close to 9,000, right? Ballpark. So I already know immediately that these two don't make sense. Now, unfortunately, these two are a little too close. So I have to go through and do the math. I'm not going to waste your time doing the whole math. You guys know how to do it. The answer actually comes out as D when you do your multiplication out the right way. But just a way to think about these problems, because remember, on the FSA, you have about 3 or 4 minutes to do each question. Some of them might take you longer, some might take you less. But this is where one, like if you're a little confused, eliminate, right? We say it all the time. If you got to get to the point where you got to guess, it's better to guess out of 2 choices than 4, right? It gives you a better chance. Okay, number 7. If you guys remember the rule that we talked about, there's 2 ways to do number 7. Do all the work or remember our rule. We've said it 900 million times that if a fraction is multiplied by a number, it's going to get smaller. It sounds the opposite, right? Because when you multiply, you think things get bigger. But with fractions, when it's less than 1, if you divide, it's getting bigger because you're breaking it up. If you multiply, you're making it smaller, right? So this one says select the expression that is equal. Here's the key word. You have no idea what to do. If you don't read the words first, you have no clue what to do. Equal. So it's got to be equal. Well, if you know the rule, 1/2 is going to make this smaller. And they give you the expression, and it's the same number here for all the choices. Always check that first. They give you the answer up here. Check and make sure it's equal. Well, this is a fraction. It's going to make it get smaller. Now this, don't let this confuse you, because 8/2, that's not actually a fraction. Well, it's in a fraction form, but if you reduce it out, you get a 4. And if you multiply 4 by that, that's going to get way bigger, right? Here's the trick. 10/10 equals 1. Any number multiplied by itself will equal itself. So your answer should be D. All right, let's keep it going. Let's see here. Select one answer from each box to make the statement true. The product of 1/10 times 8,531. This is the rule. You got to remember the rule. It always gets less than. Less than. That is because 1/10 is less than one whole. Those are the key words, right? So I know that one's a little tricky, but you have to read through all the choices. Only one of those things makes sense. Now, here's the problem. If you don't know the rule, you can still do the math. You can solve it by multiplying that, and you'll see that it gets less. But if you just remember the rule, especially on our FSA test, that's the kind of problem that instead of having to do this big problem, 1/10 times 8, 5, 3, 1, and use all these big numbers, and then you get into a big division. Isn't it just much easier just to know the rule, right? That fraction is going to make it smaller. All right, number 9 is a hard one. Now, we know area is multiplying. So you have to multiply this out. This is one you've just got to take your time and you've just got to solve. It's going to be tough. So 3, if we convert this, we would take 3 times 1 plus that. We would get 5/3 by converting this. Now we've got to convert this one, and that would give us 18, 23, 6. And we know we're multiplying, right? So if we multiply this straight across, you would get 115 over 18. That's not one of our choices. So then you've got to go 18. And remember, a fraction is just a division problem, right? This 18 goes into the 115. And you would get 18. It doesn't go into the 100, doesn't go into the 11. It goes in, let's try. I look over here, it's got to be 6 or 5. So let's try the 6. That would give me 8, carry the 4, 10, regroup 7. That would give me 6 as my whole. Now, right when I get 6 as my whole, there's only one of them over here that has 6 as the whole, right? So if you had to make a guess and the rest of the math didn't work out, that's probably a pretty good guess, right? But then here is my 7/18 that would come over here to make my fraction to get that. See what we're doing? All right. Now, what is the expression of the value of this expression? This is just adding. Now, Mr. Speen and I have to admit, we didn't actually practice any of these that have 3. We did a bunch of 2s, tons of times, right? We forgot about the one with 3, but it's simple. Do what we said. Just line them up. 7/8, 3/4, 1/2. Hold on, I'm drawing random lines here. Find your common denominator. 2, 4, and 8 all go into 8. So this one would say 7/8. This one, 4 goes into the 8. 2 times that is 6. Denominator and 8. 2 goes to 4. 4 times 1 is 4. And now you just add. 6 plus 4 is 10. 7 plus 10 is 17 with your denominator of 8. And number 10 comes out to, written right here on our paper, C. 17/8. So really no way to figure that. There's no guessing, no playing around with that one. You got to try to kind of do your work on that one. All right, let's see here. Let's go on to number 11. When it says to select the expression that is equivalent, you got to know equivalent means equal or you'll get messed up. We talk about it all the time, right? There's really not a lot of tricks here. You just got to do the math. So I start looking at my choices, and we've taught you this. Take the zeros off. 2 goes into 60 30 times. Well, that doesn't equal 31, so I can definitely eliminate that one, right? Now, to save myself time, because you've got to get through some of these problems, I try to think this 30, I know it's got to come out to 31. So which one of those, when I look in here, this 10 right here, this 10 going into this 500 is going to probably get me an answer like in the 50s, right? This 1 going into this 300 is going to get me an answer in the 30s. And this 2 going into this 700 is going to get me something like in the 30s or the 3s, right? It goes in 2, goes into 7 like 3 times. So that could be it. So I'm pretty sure A is not the answer. So I just do that first because I want to try to pick the one that I think is going to be right. So I know if this was a 10 going into 300, that would be very close to 300, right? Or to 31. So I'm going to pick B as the one to start with, because if I get it right on the first time, then I don't have to check every single one, right? So 11 goes into 34 3 times. 34 minus 33 is 1. Drop down our 1. 11 into 11, 31. We found it on the first try, right? So you don't have to do those things that like I'm showing you with the test taking strategies. But if you can start to think of the problems like that, you can start to eliminate choices that don't make sense. And we're not in this for speed. I don't want anybody to think we want you to, rush through any of these answers. That's not what we want. But remember, there is a certain, you don't want to spend 30 minutes doing one problem and then miss 10 problems at the end because of it, right? Do your best, eliminate the ones that make sense. And after about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of working through it, if you don't get it, try to make your best choice and then move on, right? Number 3 seems really, really difficult, but it's not. There's 3 gallons of juice. Here they are. She wants to divide it equally among her 16 students. So that means you're going to start chopping this thing up, right? Well, if we're chopping it up and we're making more, we're chopping it up, you're dividing it, right? So you would be dividing 3 by 16. And you guys have to just start. This was on our monthly too. You have to know that this just converts into the fraction 3/16, right? Because this is 3 divided by 16. This is 16 going into the 3. This is 3 getting broken up by 16. So to answer this one, you would put in 3/16. And they put these on. You've got to bubble it in. Make sure you get all the bubbles. And that would be it, right? But I know this one looks like it gets tricky. You think you got to do all kinds of crazy things, but it's not. The next one, you're finding area again. So all you have to do is take 2/5. You have to know that area equals length times width. We've been doing that since 2nd grade. So don't let the fractions confuse you that they're there. And all you do is set it up. And then remember, multiplication is the best one, right? Because you just multiply across. So, I mean, this problem, if you know this formula and you know how to multiply fractions, the problem is really just 2 times 5 and 5 times 6. And right when you do 2 times 5, you know it's 10. Only one of these has a 10 in the numerator, right? Like, look at your choices. Only one has a 10 there. So just different little ways to check yourself. All right, let's keep going. You guys can stop this video and slow down anytime you want, but I'm going to keep it going. You have to know the rule for this next one, right? Or else you have to do all the work. One of the two. Fill in the circles to match the value of the expression to the correct description of the product. So I hope you guys know that 4/4 equals 1. And anything times 1 would be equal, right? So you'd pick H for this one because 5,198 times 1 would be equal to 5,998. Now, we said when you multiply fractions, the number gets smaller. Well, here is our fraction, right? The fraction has to be less than 1. So 6/8 is not a full 1, right? You need 8/8 to be 1. 6/8 is smaller. So you need to know that when you multiply any number by a fraction that's less than 1, you don't even have to do the math. It's less than. Now look up here. This 3/2, it's bigger than 1, right? Because you got to take that 2 in the denominator and put it into the numerator. So this number is actually 1 1/2. So any number times a whole number at least stays the same if it's a 1, right? So that 1 keeps it the same, but then that half makes it bigger then, right? So this one is definitely going to get bigger. So if you know, that's one of the things where, like, if you remember the rule about fractions, some of these problems only take you really short time, right? But you could do the math. If you did the math and solved these out, you would get the answer also, right? But try. Math moving forward is all about trying to remember the rules because the math is pretty easy for you guys. It's the rules and the words a lot of times that screw us up. This one, to show the expression, this is from monthly 1 that we did earlier. You guys all do pretty good with this. You know, you got to divide it out to make sure you write the numbers right. I was solving this one earlier and accidentally wrote a 4 here. I wrote a 4 right here. And it took me the longest time to figure out why I couldn't get the answer to equal out. So make sure you take your time and write out 24 goes in 1. 1, drop down the 9, 20. Now here's where you could get tricked. 24 goes into 19 0 times. So that'd be 0, 0. You'd still have the 19. Now you drop down the 2. And now you've got to get 24 to go into 192. And I think that is 8. Is 32. Carry the 3, 16, 17, 18, 19. So your answer is 108. Now remember, in these boxes, you can put them in starting going in the front, or you can go in the back. You can't do it in the middle. Okay? All right, let's look. Number 16 was very, very tough. Number 16 took me a long time to figure out, and I think I tried to make it too complicated. But really, it just wants you to make an estimate, right? So Juan and Maria built birdhouses for the weekend. One weekend, Juan used 2 3/6 feet of wood, and Maria used 5 3/5. About how many feet of wood did they use? Well, 5 plus 2 is 7. So we know they at least got to 7, right? 3/6 reduces to a half. So once you add in the 3/5, we're definitely going to go between 7 and 7.5. That doesn't make sense, right? Because just adding in the 3/6, I'm already at a half. So I'm definitely going to go over, right? Now, I also know I've already used this 2 right here. I've already used this 5 right here. So that's my 7, right? Now, this 3/6 is a half. Now, I only have 3/5 left. That's a little more than a half, right? So I know I'm over the. There's no way I'm going to get all the way to 8.5 because I would need a whole another 1 to get to 8.5. So that one doesn't make sense. So now I'm down to 2 choices. So all you have to do is take the 3/5 and the 3/6 and add them together. Now, remember, adding, you have to find your common denominator, which would make this 30. That would make it 18. That would make this 30. 5 times the 3 is 15. That would give you 33 on the top of 30. So now 30 goes in. Oh, hold on. 30 goes into this 33 one time with 3 left over 30. So now you've got to take this 1 and add it to that. So now we're at least 8, right? And we're bigger than 8 because you still got, after you get to 8, you still got 3/30 left, right? So now we're already over this. So now without doing any more math, I already know what the answer has got to be, right? Because you reduce this 3/30 to 1/10. So the answer to this problem, when you solve the whole thing, would be 8 1/10, which would fall right here in the C category, right? Now, I know that sounds, you guys are all going, oh my gosh, she talked so much. That was so much stuff. Just add, when you're doing an estimate, just add the whole number together. Just add the 5 plus 2 is a 7, and then add the 2 fractions together, and then put it all together. And the answer will be, you'll start to just eliminate the ones that don't make sense, right? Number 17 is either simple as heck or hard as heck for you, depending on if you remember my rule that I've said 10 times. If it's a fraction less than 1 and you multiply, it gets smaller. If it's bigger than 1, it gets bigger. Now make sure, here's the keys to this question, expressions. That means there's going to be more than one answer. We miss that a lot. You guys pick one and then you stop. There's more than one answer. Don't do it. And we need to know a product that is less. So if it's less, we need to look for fractions less than 1. Anytime there's a fraction less than 1, that's going to be one of the answers, right? And look, they kept all the numbers the same here. Your whole number here, they did not change it. So let's go right through. 6/4 is bigger than 1. That's not a choice. 2/5 is a fraction less than 1. B is one of your choices. 3/3 equals 1. So this number is not going to get less because it's multiplied by 1. That is not one of your choices. 3/4 is a fraction less than 1. That is one of your choices, D. 2/8 is a fraction less than 1. That is going to be one of your choices. And 7/5 is bigger. I need you guys to understand 7/5 is bigger because you got to put this 5 into the 7. It goes one whole time. and then you have 2 left over. So this is 1 2/5. It's not a fraction less than 1, right? So that one doesn't make sense. So there were 3 answers here. When it says expressions or select all, you've got to look at every single choice or you'll get it wrong. All right, last 3. Number 18 is the same problem we've done a quadrillion times in this test. It's just multiplying. Look, they built a garden, a length of 2 2/4, a width of 3/5. What is the square area of the garden box? All you're doing is multiplying. Let's convert this 2 2/4. You would do 4 times 2 is 8, plus this 2 is 10 fourths. That's just turning that into a fraction, converting that into a fraction, right? Times the width of 3/5. You multiply across 30 over 20. That is not one of our choices over here. So you got to think, can I do anything to this to reduce it out, make it back to a whole number in a fraction? 20 goes into 30 one time with 10 left over 20. And there's your answer right there, A, right? So make sure you're checking your paper to see what you put. Number 20 or number 19, if you know the rule, ding, ding, ding on the rule. If you know the rule, this question's simple. John said he walked 10,426 steps in one day. His brother walked 3/4 of as many steps. So if he only did 3/4, that's not a full one, right? That's a fraction that's less. John says he took more steps than his brother. Which of the following explains why John's statement is correct? So they're telling us his statement's correct. We know John walked more, but why? Well, let's look down here. John's statement is not correct. Well, D doesn't make sense, right? Because they told us the statement is correct, so the answer can't be D. Because 3/4 is equal to 1, that doesn't even make sense. 3/4 is not equal to 1. 1 is equal to 1. So now we're down to 2 choices. And this is the rule, right? So we know Richie, his number's got to be less than 10,426. And that's because he did 3/4, which is a fraction less than 1. So because 3/4 is less than 1, that is why John walked more, right? You guys have got to remember the rule. That one you can't get right unless you kind of know the rule, right? Because it could be tricky. Now, you can eliminate the ones that for sure don't make sense, but you got to remember that. Okay, last one. We had a lot of people get the first part of this right and then not the second part. So let's take a look at why. Addie and Jayla both solved this equation. There's their work. Here's where we messed up. It says whose work is incorrect and why. Whose work is incorrect? Well, if I look at Jayla, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 6 is 6, 2 times 2 is 4. So they both have the ones part right. Now let's look at the next part. Jayla puts in her placeholder here. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 2 is 2, 2,000. They add it out. So Jayla's correct. Now let's look. We know Addie had to make a mistake somewhere in here. Well, 10, this 1 right here is really a 10, right? In the 12, it's a 10. You've got to put your placeholder in right here, right? So what did she do? She actually made this a 1, and then 1 times 2 is 2, instead of making this a 10 times this 2, which would be a 20, right? So that's her mistake. Now, what a lot of you did was you didn't pay attention to this word right here, because most of the time in these problems, they would ask you who's correct. So a lot of you picked Jayla immediately because she was right, but you didn't read the words. So you guys need to know that Addie is the correct answer because she's the one that got it wrong. Now, almost everybody missed this last part, and Mr. Speen and I even had to talk about it for a second. Let's take a look. One of these is why she was incorrect. Now, we know that she didn't do the place value, right? She didn't move into the tens column, right? So she actually made this 1 right here that's actually a 10 in the tens place. She actually made it a 1 because 1 times 2, she should have the 2 here for 20, right? Because it's really 10. And she put it over here. So let's look. She didn't regroup. Neither of these problems have regrouping in them, right? There's no regrouping. There's none anywhere. So C can't be the answer. It doesn't make sense. There's no regrouping. Now it says she multiplied the place values in the wrong order. Now she multiplied her place. She did mess up the place values, right? She did mess up the place values by putting this in the wrong, but she didn't go in the wrong order. She put them in the wrong place. So this is tricky because D sounds like it would be the right answer. I actually thought it was the right answer for a second. But E is a much better, makes more sense answer, right? She multiplied by 1 instead of by 10. This number right here, when she puts this 2 right here, she's saying this is equal to 1, right? Because 1 times 2 is 2. Now, I know it's a little off, but in the real problem over here, 1 times 2, when she puts it right here, look what that equals. We even put in the place value, 20, right? So she actually turned this 1, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. She actually turned this 10 into a 1. So your answer is actually E. So I want you guys to take your report that I emailed to you, and you can go back and check these. You can look at the problem before I solve it out and try to solve it, check your answer, then listen to the explanation. Do whatever you can do to try to solve these and think through them so that when we review later, you can come to us with questions. All right? If you guys need to know anything else, let Mr. Speen and I know. And I hope you guys use this to help you. All right. See you in a little bit.